Today is a very special day. It's the moment that I will be reviewing La Grande Découverte by Byredo. Does not even fit into one shot, but this is a train of discovery set. Look at all these wonders. Byredo is the brand from Sweden, and that's probably the only Swedish brand that I know. And it is popular for its three main fragrances. These are the best sellers of the brand, and these are the fragrances that you probably have already heard about. I would say that these three, they really meet my idea of Swedish minimalism, and I really do see why these fragrances are so much liked and why they are so popular. I cannot say that these are my favorite fragrances of the set, and the main reason is the level of intensity. To me, these perfumes are too low on the scale of my intensity, probably around 3 out of 10. They are just a little bit brighter than a skin scent. These are the perfumes that you are more likely to wear for yourself rather than for others. Although if you do overspray, you will have some radiation for maybe 3-4 hours. But considering the price, overspraying might not be an option for everybody. Out of the three best sellers of Byredo, I would say that Gypsy Water is the one that probably radiates the most. It's still not very intense. Maybe it's around 5 on the scale of intensity. And it certainly is very unique, and I don't think I've tried anything similar to Gypsy Water. Once I saw Rose Huntington on the internet saying that this is her favorite fragrance, and that was probably the best advertising for it. Because of course many girls would like to associate themselves with the femininity and beauty of Rose Huntington. However, I would say that the opening is a bit more masculine. To me, it feels like a gin tonic, where you have the zesty skin of citruses, something bittery. Juniper berries and incense totally make sense in here, but the element that really stands out and makes this perfume unique is pine needles. If you're a fan of unusual notes, and pine needles specifically, you will definitely find them here, you will definitely enjoy them. And that mix of incense and pine needles is very unusual. And the pine needles are very prominent almost from the beginning. Then when we move towards the middle of the pyramid, I'm surprised not to find any florals in here, because to me it smells something what I had in mind when I smelled the fragrance of État Libre d'Orange called Jasmine and Cigarettes, because the middle smells to me more like jasmine with incense. Not so much cigarettes that I hate, but more of a incense, metallic-y incense, and still pine needles that are getting a bit weaker at this point. And in the base we have Ambroxan. I usually don't like Ambroxan so much, but here is the case when it's done really nicely. It's not disturbing, it holds the structure of the fragrance, but just don't have high hopes for rich woodiness that you might be expecting from the combination of amber and sandalwood. Vanilla in here, it's a synthetic vanilla that does a really good job adding a little sweetness, but it's not the kind of vanilla that would interest vanilla lovers like me. An interesting thing about this fragrance that it evaluates from something that feels a bit masculine to me to something that feels more like a feminine skin. And when I describe this fragrance and the notes, I think this is something that I'm supposed to like. And when I smell it, I kind of think, okay, this is interesting. But at the end, I cannot say that I really enjoy wearing it so much. There is nothing particularly that disturbs me, that I dislike. But I think when it comes to the scents that are close to our skin, we tend to choose something that is closer to our natural smell. So it might be closer to the natural smell of Rose Huntington, but it's not so close to my natural smell. Out of the three best sellers of Byredo, the closest one to my smell, to my taste, is probably Mojave Ghost. To me, this is probably the most feminine out of three. And the reason I liked it is that it has magnolia that I really appreciate. Magnolia can be overly sweet and sometimes cloying in some fragrances, but here it's done exactly the way I like my magnolia. I even got a miniature from Byredo. I will show you how it looks. Really easy to carry in my purse, but unfortunately it doesn't have a spray. The cap is really easy to open, it's just untwisting. And it's just so pretty. It's like magnolia blending in with my skin chemistry. That's the reason I love it so much. The rest of the notes are pretty delicate, but I do feel something woody. And actually it feels like a woody cream, like some sort of a skincare. And this is probably true for all three bestsellers of Byredo. They feel like luxury creams. And I think whether you like them or not really depends on your skin chemistry. So my choice is Mojave Ghost. That is slightly woody, slightly powdery, but mostly it's a beautiful, beautiful magnolia. And the last bestseller is Bal d'Afrique. For me, this is the most mysterious one because the notes are really hard to guess. As a scent, it's actually really delicate, not something I expected from the name Bal d'Afrique. The pyramid that you see on Fragrantica is a little bit wrong, so you have to go to the official website to see the actual notes. So the opening is citrusy, and this one is the easy part, but there is something very interesting in the heart of this composition. That's the part that makes it really unique. At the beginning, before reading the notes, I was thinking in the direction of aquatic flowers, lotus or water lilies, and then I was getting something very, very thin, tropical. The first association that I actually had was guava juice. If you go to the official website, you will see a very interesting note that is called bucho, or in some African countries they call it buco. This is the secret ingredient that makes this fragrance very unusual. So bucho is actually a herb that grows on the African continent, and it has a very unusual scent profile. It combines the notes like cassis, peaches, mango, and camphor oil. I never really tried it in reality, not in a form of herbal tea or even as an essential oil. I'm going to try to find the essential oil with bucho, but for now I could just understand the profile that was created on Fragrantica. Another link to the African name is hiding in the African marigold flowers. That bitterness is hidden somewhere in the bitterness of citrusy skins. So if you're not a fan of marigolds, you will not be disturbed by them in here. Overall, I really enjoyed Bal d'Afrique. The thing is that I would prefer those middle notes that I receive as aquatic flowers in the breeze of tropical fruits. I would like that center to be stronger because overall this fragrance goes from the top of the pyramid with citruses, targetes towards the dry down. And in 1 hour, I mostly get that ambroxan that is so nicely done by Byredo, and it just makes me think of some watery woods, which is very pleasant, but I just wish it was composed a bit differently. The three best sellers, they really have a very common style that many people associate with the style of the brand. But this is kind of misleading because Byredo has so many different fragrances that vary on the level of intensity, that vary on their styles and gender orientations. If I speak about these three, I would add a fourth one that is not a part of the Discovery set, and this one is Unnamed, that does not have any name, by Byredo. And it was made by Byredo for its anniversary. I don't think it's as popular as the other three, but it is very similar in style. When I first smelled it, I thought it smells like violets and green peas. And the core of it really reminded me of the fragrance by Balenciaga that has been discontinued, but it's a beautiful, fresh, summery perfume, and so is Unnamed by Byredo. It is truly unisex, but to my taste it has a bit too much greenness than I would prefer. But I think a lot of people do like it. And of course, as a base, we have the famous ambroxan that is very much used by Byredo. It was used in famous Baccarat Rouge that comes with a scent of cedar wood, fir resin, and a bit of musk. Here in the description, we don't have all the elements. And unlike Baccarat Rouge, Unnamed by Byredo does not have the same projection, the same longevity. And I wouldn't even say it has any animalic character in the base. It really is more like a green powdery, I would say. But I can imagine a lot of people appreciating it in the summertime, especially those who appreciate low level of intensity and a scent blending in with their skin, because this is another Byredo creation that is more or less skin scent. Roses, roses, roses. I really love the smell of rose flowers, but unfortunately, roses in fragrances don't smell like real rose flowers. And most of the time, I dislike roses in perfumes. Byredo has 6 different perfumes in a Discovery set that feature roses. 3 of them have rose in the name, a young rose, rose noir, and rose of no man's land. And 3 others don't mention rose in the name, but to me, they have a pretty strong presence of rose. And I will start with these 3. The perfume that really surprised me is called Black Saffron. Saffron is a note that usually accompanies leather accords and any leather fragrances. Here it is defined as a leather fragrance, but I would say it's a very delicate kind of leather. And the element that surprised me here is the rose that I actually liked. And I was trying to understand why did I like this rose. And this was not because of saffron. In fact, this was because of raspberry. I noticed that this combination of raspberry rose is something that I usually like. I cannot say it's a big like, but it's not such a big dislike as most of roses. The opening of this fragrance is actually really light. Roses, citruses, juniper berries, and raspberries, they create this beautiful light and crystallic rose. Actually, in the official description of Byredo, the rose is called crystallic. And the accord of leather and saffron, they are sort of delayed and they show up later, and the fragrance gains intensity only after half an hour or so. In the worst case scenario, this should be named pink saffron, definitely not black saffron. There is nothing dark about this perfume, and it actually is one of my favorites of the set. Super Citter. This fragrance made me think of Baccarat Rouge 540, especially the way Ambroxan sounds in here. But here it features the type of Ambroxan that really has cedarwood in the center of composition. If I find Baccarat Rouge to be a very feminine kind of perfume, yes, I know it's unisex and a lot of gentlemen like wearing it, I personally think that Super Citter is much better for gentlemen. It's like a male counterpart of Baccarat Rouge. So if you're a couple, I really recommend trying Baccarat Rouge for a lady and Super Citter for a gentleman. And don't mind rose petals. The touch of roses is so thin, it does not add much of femininity in here. And also the name could be a bit misleading, Super Citter. There's nothing super about this cedar. It's actually very delicate and airy kind of perfume. Blanche. If someone tells you that this smells like white roses, you should ask how much this person is paid, or if this person is nose blind, because this fragrance has nothing to do with white roses. Blanche, yes, it is translated as white, but it's not white roses, it's not any white flower. This is a smell of soap or detergent. And you could immediately guess by seeing aldehydes in the pyramid. And I don't know why they keep putting aldehydes on the top of the pyramid, because this note is so strong that every time I see it, it goes throughout the entire pyramid and lasts till the very last second. I've heard people saying that Blanche smells like a clean girl. I would say it does not smell like a girl. It smells like cleanness itself. And yes, there is a touch of rose in here, but to me it still smells like a detergent, maybe with the scent of rose. That's how I would describe it. And I personally don't like detergent kind of fragrances, especially when they are as strong as Blanche. The only occasion when I can see wearing it myself is, for example, if I have to wear the same shirt to work on the second day for whatever reasons, and I need to pretend that it's a fresh shirt, I would spray Blanche on my shirt, and this would pass for a freshly ironed shirt maybe. Otherwise, not my cup of tea. The rose that has an intriguing name, Rose Noir. I tested it before I read the pyramid, and I was thinking that's a very unique kind of incense. A bit floral, a bit spicy, but kind of smokiness blended with the smell of humidity, wet soil, or basement kind of smell. I had a Halloween video dedicated to the dark side of flowers, and if I had tried this fragrance before making that video, I would definitely include Rose Noir in my Halloween video, because this is a story of a dark rose appearing in that darkness, little by little. And when that rose appears, it's very clear that this is a cheaper fragrance. It did make me think a bit of the 80s. You remember those heavy syrupy, chypre fragrances. If you know some people who want to get away from those fragrances but have difficulty changing their tastes, I think Rose Noir would be a perfect way to switch into something modern yet reminiscent of the classics. This perfume is not a charmer. It took me a while to wear it and I continued smelling it and smelling it before I actually liked it. It takes a bit of time to go deep into the darkness to discover the complexity and beauty of this fragrance. And what you find in that darkness is a very serious patchouli mixed with oak moss. I know it does not sound attractive to a lot of people, but I think those who appreciate different nuances and characters of roses would appreciate this one. I imagine this perfume to be perfect for a cougar woman or for someone who goes to an opera and wants to impress people going there for decades. So I think your grandmother would appreciate Rose Noir. And when it comes to your grandfather, there's also something for him. And this one is Sunday Cologne. When I smell something intense like that, the only note that I recognize is geranium, and I don't even want to dig further because my nose is already in shock. The only thing that I can tell you that there's nothing feminine about it, despite that Byredo created it as a unisex fragrance. And I don't think that younger guys of today's generation would appreciate the intensity and complexity of this fragrance. But if your grandfather is going out on Sunday, he might want to try this. A young rose has something crystallic and dewy about it, but I don't agree with the pyramid the way I see it on Fragrantica. In fact, I don't feel any spiciness and pepper in here. And I find the mix of rose and iris to be misleading. To me, this is a typical mix of rose and lily of the valley, which gives what I call a new doll effect. And you can find it in many perfumes of different brands. This is not something unique. But definitely don't search for any iris in here. Despite that it's pretty delicate, it actually lasts pretty long. The other fragrance is also very long lasting, but here it's not surprising because this one has modern ambers as a base. And when I say modern ambers, I mean that it's a kind of amber that sounds more like a mix of amber and musk. So here we have a Turkish rose, which I'm surprised to see that it is a Turkish rose because usually when I see a Turkish rose, it's pretty annoying. Here it's not annoying so much. It's still kind of light and transparent, not very heavy, not oily or dirty. But ambery musk certainly makes it a bit more mature compared to young rose. The next group are 4 fragrances that are floral imitations. And one of the best floral imitations that I've tried, not only from Byredo but overall, is called Inflorescence. And it depicts really well a natural flower of lily of the valley. I know that lily of the valley, even as a flower, is not everyone's cup of tea, but I personally adore the flowers of lily of the valley. Despite that, I've always hated lily of the valley as a note in fragrances. And the reason is that I always found lily of the valley either too synthetic or too much glowing. Very often it accompanies notes that I don't like, such as roses and aldehydes, or it can be a part of the mature composition, something that reminds me of the 80s. Here we have real, natural, beautiful, delicate, young lily of the valley. And yes, there are some other florals in the pyramid, but I don't really feel them. Or they just help to imitate this lily of the valley fragrance. So to my nose, this is a really beautiful floral imitation, very close to reality. The next one is Flowerhead. And this one is a very unusual tuberose. When it comes to tuberose fragrances, once again, it's not everyone's cup of tea. A lot of people find it glowing. A lot of people associate it with fragrances for older ladies. I like many tuberose fragrances, but I also dislike many tuberose fragrances. So now, tuberose could be indolic, it could be tropical, it could be more natural. For example, I have a video comparing Narcotic Venus by Nasomato and Tuberosa by Nishané. And these two are my favorite tuberose fragrances because they really imitate a very natural tuberose. Now, the element that those fragrances have in common is a little green touch. But that touch of green is very tiny and it fits well into that blend that has such a harmony. Here what we have is that green element being taken to another level and exaggerated to the point that I personally find it quite disbalanced. So here we are dealing with a green tuberose. It's really, really super green. It does not have any sweetness. It still has a very high level of intensity, of floral intensity. But I don't know how to explain that tuberose is actually green. It's like bananas. As a fruit, banana is very sweet, but when bananas are green, they have something different about them. Some greenness instead of sweetness. So here it's the same. It's like tuberose that is not ripe. It definitely is very unique, but I personally don't enjoy it and I do find it a bit cloying. The next perfume is also very unique. This one is a very successful flower imitation, and this one is the favorite perfume of the set for me, and it's called Mixed Emotions. Mixed Emotions causes indeed very mixed emotions on Fragrantica. There are people who love this perfume, there are people who hate this perfume. I am personally head over heels about it. And this one is an imitation of Black Currant in Bloom. I don't know if you have that real life experience of smelling the flowers of black currant and rubbing them between your fingers. This is something we do in Russia. We have black tea prepared with black currant leaves and flower buds, and this is just the aroma that brings all the memories of dacha. It's just so perfectly balanced. It has a little bit of acidity, a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of greenness, and it has a beautiful kind of delicate, powdery, watery, woody background. Out of all floral imitations, this one is appropriate for both genders. If Mixed Emotions was big love for me, the next fragrance indeed caused mixed emotions for me. And this one is called La Tulipe. This is another flower that is very rare in fragrances, and the reason is that tulips don't really smell. This is a kind of imaginary smell. And tulip flowers cannot be processed for using in perfume industry. So Byredo, I think, did a pretty good job imitating a tulip flower. But at the same time, this is a kind of fragrance that would be appreciated by those who love pretty strong green notes in their fragrances, because there's a lot of greenness in this tulip. When I was wearing it, I was not really certain how I was feeling. At times I did like it. I was getting lots of compliments on it. But at some point, I thought it's not really something that I would wear all the time. So I'd be very happy to use this sample. The next group is what I call modern ambers. And if you watch my blog, you probably have already heard me complaining about modern ambers, because very frequently they irritate my nose, and I especially don't like when this modern ambers or a mix of modern ambers masks dominate over fragrances and kill other notes. As I have already mentioned, Byredo uses frequently ambroxan, and the fragrance called Super Citter is practically ambroxan itself. When it comes to this group of fragrances, these ambers are more intense, more complex. I think Byredo does a wonderful job playing with these ambers and pulling them into different directions. And fragrances don't end up smelling just like amber in 10 minutes. All these perfumes are much more intense than the three best sellers of Byredo, so they're absolutely different style. All of them are unisex and could be used by both ladies and gentlemen. But overall, I would say that this group is made for more mature audience. So all of these fragrances have a slightly animalic vibe, and I also like how vanilla is blended in here. This vanilla is kind of dusty, dirty, but beautiful in its own way. The fragrance that I find the least intense and probably the least animalic is ironically called Animalique. This one is one of the last creations of Byredo. The way this fragrance goes, it goes from kind of delicate, almost skin-like scent, moving into direction of leather, suede, and more animalic accords. So the beginning, this leather is kind of powdery, almost feminine. It has floral notes of violet and mimosa, according to the description. Not overly sweet, and then this suede is intensifying. And floral accords of violet and mimosa, they give the way to tobacco. And this transition is absolutely amazing. So this fragrance could actually be dangerous for those who like buying perfumes at the first sniff. The dry down is totally different than the opening. And I really appreciate perfumes that really play with us and change during wearing time. The name might create the expectations of having very animalic kind of perfume, but I wouldn't say that this is an animalic type of leather. The next fragrance that also features leather is called Bibliothèque. As you guess, this one is supposed to awaken memories of a library and old books with leather covers. I personally really like this perfume, but not because of the leather accord, but because of plum. Plum is one of my favorite notes and it's rarely done properly. Here it's really lovely. Even realistic, there is this sweetness and sourness at the same time. I also get a lot of dusty vanilla. This kind of dusty, dirty vanilla. Maybe that's what is supposed to give you the idea of an old library. I personally don't get that association, but nonetheless I really find this creation really beautiful. And I really like the softness of leather in here. So plum lovers, don't miss on Bibliothèque. The next fragrance also has unusual sweetness and it has the same level of intensity as Bibliothèque, but it has so much more going on in here. If you read the opinions on Fragrantica, they are all over the place. People are getting all different kinds of associations. I personally get that sweetness that I confused for plum, but then I saw that it's fig, and it does make sense that it's a fig. However, it's not a typical sweet, fruity, juicy, pulpy fig. This one has a presence of balsamic herbal accords. If I have to simplify the notes that I'm getting in here after the perfume is already settled on my skin, I would say I get a smell of a barrel where they were aging cognac. So the barrel has been emptied, but that smell of cognac is still remaining. And I get that woody scent that has absorbed that alcohol and sweetness and something that is honey-like and smells a bit like dried fruits. And I was entertaining that thought about cognac, and at the end I arrived to the fragrance that is called 1270. And this one is made by a perfume house that actually specialized in making cognac that is called Saffron. And this one has also lots of interesting notes, but in reality it's not as sweet as it seems. While the 11th hour is actually much sweeter and the dry down of it is more intense. I also get something animalic in here, possibly leathery, and I get once again that dusty kind of vanilla. Dirty, dusty, animalic vanilla. Can you imagine that? So 11th hour has so much complexity that I will not be describing it furthermore. I really recommend you trying it, especially if you are into very complex and deep fragrances. Then I have two fragrances that have different notes, but in my mind they are very similar in style and the level of intensity. And these are 1996 and Slow Dance. Both of them have very complex base that is again modern amber, and this modern amber is pulled in the direction of mostly patchouli, is sugared and sweetened, and again has a dusty vanilla. Something animalic is present once again in both, to the point that in 1996 that animalic element gives me something fecalic, very distantly, not crazily unpleasant, but still I probably prefer Slow Dance, especially because it has some sweetness that once again reminds me of that plum that is present in Bibliothèque. So if you're a plum lover, I recommend you trying both side by side, although plum is not listed in Slow Dance and it has a higher level of intensity, but it is a kind of sweetness that might be attractive to both ladies and gentlemen. The only thing is about this fragrance that I did not get is the metaphor of a slow dance in high school. Believe me, this fragrance is very sophisticated, and I absolutely don't associate it with the innocence of young girls and boys that are turning into men and women. Both Slow Dance in 1996 could be a bit too sweet for some people. But this is not a gourmand kind of sweetness. This is a deep amber resins kind of sweetness. I personally like the sweetness of Slow Dance because it again reminds me of that nice cognac that features dried fruits, maybe honey and linden notes. While 1996 is a bit strange, and its sweetness has something that reminds me of iodium. So on the first approach, it's not something that I disliked, but when I start smelling it deeper and trying to break it down into the notes, I realized that I actually prefer Slow Dance much more than 1996. And the last fragrance in the group that actually is quite different is called Oud Immortel. Byredo gives a really nice description of this perfume, but unfortunately I think a lot of agarwood lovers might not appreciate this one. I personally didn't. First of all, Oud Immortel is made for incense lovers, and you get incense most of the time. And you don't get that beautiful, unusual note of limoncello. Maybe some cardamom, but mostly this incense is pretty strong and transparent and lasts pretty long. Then agarwood and something leathery comes out. And I'm already not a fan of this combination of agarwood and incense, but then we get a note of papyrus that to me sounds like a crushed glass or paper. Also, smokiness transforms into tobacco. So all these transformations actually sound really interesting, but in reality I get fecalic smell. And if in 1996 it was very, very distant, here it's pretty strong. And that fecalic smell is not something that is a result of my skin chemistry, because I also tried it on a paper. Overall, it's not an intense fragrance. The fragrance that is really, really super intense and where feces really go to its maximum is called Mumbai Noise. Imagine being on the street of Mumbai with the smells of different food shops and animals and human sweat. What kind of perfume would you wear to be noticeable in all that noise? This fragrance needs to be loud and overpowering, and this is Mumbai Noise. Because this fragrance is just a killer, and it has some kind of amazing quality of expanding. It's like a gift that keeps on giving. It's a perfume that keeps on expanding and becomes louder and louder till it gives you headache. Once again, I get the same kind of base that is a mix of amber, musk, and maybe you think even of some patchouli and leather and oud and labdanum and maybe some alcohol at the same time. There's just like too much. It's like the explosion of scents. I did not even put it on my skin. I tried it on the wrist of a gentleman that was sitting across from me, having one spray on one wrist, and that smell was annoying me. It created a cloud for both of us, or maybe for half a restaurant, because this perfume is really a bomb. The next two perfumes are probably the strangest creations of Byredo, and these are Sundazed and Eyes Closed. And Sundazed wins the prize of the strangest one. Because when I smelled it, it smelled like a hair salon in the 90s when hair perm was very popular. When you walk into a salon and you smell shampoos, hair perm, hair coloring. It's kind of clean and chemical at the same time. When I look at the description, neroli does make sense, but it seems like that neroli is mixed with something like a crushed glass, paper, birch tree maybe. This neroli is very dry and cologne-like. So I really could not appreciate Sundazed, really not my cup of tea. The other one is Eyes Closed. It kind of reminded me Sundazed in its style, despite the differences in notes. It felt like the same kind of cologne, but with a note of plums. At this point, I already know how Byredo does its plums, so it's very similar to Eyes Closed, but it has more sweetness. The official pyramid does not really give you the idea from where that sweetness is coming, but there's definitely something cologne-like, a bit spicy. When I was looking at the pyramid of Sundazed, I really could not persuade myself that it smelled like a cotton candy. Here I can persuade myself that it smells like a mix of orris, carrots, ginger and papyrus. This combination really does make sense, but overall it's still a very strange fragrance that distantly reminds me one more time this hair perm of the 80s and the 90s. Some of Byredo fragrances could be quite original, while others are not so much. For example, the Los Santos is a perfume that is riding the wave of popularity of Santal 33 by Le Labo. Once upon a time, that Santal was very liked, and many designers have created something similar, and Byredo is not an exception. You will find the same kind of freshness and a very similar pickle-like note. It's kind of funny that Fragrantica does not even list Santal in the pyramid of De Los Santos, but the similarity to Santal 33 is about 90%, I would say. Something that makes a difference in here is something minty that I catch. Mint is also not a part of the description, and of course there is Ambroxan in the base that is very common, also used by Byredo in almost all their fragrances. So I would say this is a modernized version of Santal 33. I don't think I can have any conclusion for Byredo because the variety of their fragrances is enormous. The intensity of their fragrances goes from skin scents to very intense and annoying scents. And I think anyone can find something in here that they would like. The thing that amused me and the thing that I really appreciated about Byredo is that despite that they use a lot of chemical and laboratory produced ingredients, they make them sound really interesting, really close to reality, especially when it comes to florals. And when they use modern ambers, they don't seem to annoy me as much as most modern ambers of other brands.